Hi everybody, this is Gary Waite from Pegasus Battlefield Tours here in the UK, and you're listening to Your Papers Please podcast, the show that brings you some of the lesser known history of World War II. So, welcome to episode 3 of Your Papers Please. In this episode we are continuing Cecil Newton's story, where at the end of part 1 he had just landed on Gold Beach on D-Day in his amphibious Duplex-Drive tank with the 47 Royal Dragoon Guards. In the previous episode, Cecil related how he joined the army, the death of his brother at the hands of the German SS, and the build-up to D-Day. He also told of the journey across the Channel and his landing in the first wave on Gold Beach in support of the 69th Infantry Brigade, which was the assault element of the British 50th Division. Cecil also recalled the loss of his tank on the beach, when the tank disappeared into a shell crater and effectively drowned, concealed as it was with seawater. So, with no further ado, I will hand back over to Cecil.
We landed with the 6th Green Howards, that's B Squadron. C Squadron landed with the 5th East Yorks. And then A Squadron, who had a few 17-pounder guns, the big guns, who couldn't be accommodated as a DD tank, had the 7th Green Howards. Well, we had to go into the tank. It was dry inside, and take out the bedrolls and all we could rescue and put them by the blockhouse. And 2 Green Howards came up. I was sitting on a bedroll. They had no rifles, no big pack, and one of them came and sat on the sand beside me, opened a small pack, took out a pair of rolled up dry socks, took his boots off, changed his socks to the dry ones, put the wet ones back in, took out a bottle of whiskey, had a slug at that and put that back. And when he was putting it back, I saw that it was in the inside flap was the name, Captain. I can't remember the name now. I said, "Does your captain know that you've got his haversack?" "Oh, he wouldn't mind," he said. And then years later again, person in this captain's tank, who was a 4th, 7th Royal Dragoon Guards officer, told me that he left his haversack on the front of his tank and it disappeared. So the Green Howards were really having a bit of a party. They took the haversack and had a... I don't mind blaming them. But I don't know how the war ended for them. We waited there to get some instructions, and I went round the beach, see what was happening, and it was very quiet. In fact, it was deserted in the afternoon, and I found a pile of service bicycles that had been discarded and thrown in a heap near the blockhouse. As I was a keen cyclist and have been in fact all my life, I took one of the bikes. The tide was out by then, and went for a ride down the beach. Very pleasant, and then we had to walk, carrying our kit all the way down there, all the way along the beach to Vers-sur-Mer. where John Busbridge was sitting down on some bit of equipment somewhere. Next door to him was a German officer dead in a Navy stretcher, and he told me that they were taking him, that he was wounded, the German officer of quite high rank. They were taking him back to England for medical attention, but he died very soon after, and they told John, gave him the body and told him to arrange for it to be sent back to England. That was the end of my experience of D-Day. The lorry then took us into a field, and it was about 8, 9, 10 o'clock, somewhere around there. And I lay down on the ground and looked out over the sea at the anti-aircraft fire, all the lights going up, and put the helmet over my head and had a good night's sleep. That was exhausting, the whole business, but we came out of it, our little troop, all right. Next day, the lorry took us into Vers-sur-Mer to a house opposite the church, and you can see it now, it's still there, except that they had knocked a bit of the wall down to get cars in, but there was just the door. And there was an empty room, bedroom with beds in it. And on the table in perfect English was a card with that had been bent and propped up on the table, and on it was written in perfect English, "We will return." We spent a lot of time looking out of the door, there was just a doorway then, to see the prisoners being marched down to the beach, accompanied by their French girlfriends with water and wine and things like that. All very, the Germans, I think, were very happy to get out of it. And then we went down to the beach on 2 or 3 days to help, but it was also well organised. We weren't required. But Gold Beach, when we went down there, had been dug over into the sand into underground shelters. It was absolutely packed with people, with soldiers and equipment and goodness knows what. What an enterprise. Then we were told to pick up new Sherman, ordinary Sherman tanks, and we were ferried to a depot and picked up a new Sherman tank with 250 horsepower engines. And then on the 13th, we parked at north of Langères, very Langères, the side of the road, and then we went into action. Next day, 14th of June, 1944, and 2 tanks were hit, 7 crew were killed on that day, and we got out of it again. So we were going into action with the 6th Durham Light Infantry. A Squadron were going into action with the 9th Durham Light Infantry. And it was due to start at 10:30. So we set out in the morning towards Verrières. And I can remember the colonel of the regiment, Colonel Byron, was leaning on a stick in a gap in the hedge, watching us go through. We went through a gap in the hedge and lined up in straight lines, 19, 14, 18, completely. And then we advanced. Before very long, I looked to the left and saw a vertical plume of smoke coming out of the troop leader's tank. The next thing that happened was the troop sergeant's tank went into reverse. Fred Hall got out of the driver's seat, climbed over the turret, back over the engine, dropped down behind the reversing Sherman with his hand on the rear of the tank to steady himself. I told the corporal about it in no uncertain terms, get out, get out, get out. I could see the AP coming from the tank, the German tank, which was very craftily operating from the crossroads ahead. There was a slope up, and what it was doing was advancing up I believe there were 2 there. They're advancing up the slope, firing, and then reversing back so that he was in cover. Eventually, the corporal, who was completely turned into a pillar of stone, must have indicated to the driver or something, but I doubt whether he did. And the Clifford turned right and joined the A Squadron attacking Langres. I don't think he gave any orders. You could see the AP sliding under the tank. It was incredible, with the dirt flying all over the place. On our left was a sergeant in the 6th Durham Light Infantry, and he was waving the troops forward when they saw that the tanks were in dire trouble, and waving the troops forward, and they were responding to him too. And then the colonel of the 9th, who was only about 26, Lieutenant Colonel, I believe, was killed, and we landed up at Langres, and by 4:30 the battle was over, mainly due to one person, and that was Trooper McKillock. The tanks opposite to us were the Panzerlehr, which was a crack demonstration regiment of the German army, and he was Sergeant Harris, his tank commander, had parked the tank in a recess where the small river flows from north to south across under the road, and he parked there so he had adequate cover. And as the Panzerlehr came down, he shot 5 with 5 shots. One of the A squadron commanders shot another one, so 6 of the tanks were destroyed. And so that was the end, 4:30, of the action at Langères. All the crew, the 5 in the troop leader's tank, were killed. Sergeant Fry and John Busbridge were killed. And very oddly, when the 6th DLI were to the east of the town, a Sherman tank came down the road followed by a Panther, and it must have been the troop sergeant's tank, and they found 2 bodies in a large farm complex. Years later they found 2 bodies buried by the wall, and I contacted the war graves people. Oh, they were taken and buried in the German cemetery, but I contacted the War Graves Commission and told them that they were most likely Sergeant Fry and Trooper Busbridge, but they wouldn't alter it. I said, you know, that I'd do anything from our association to pay for any DNA or identification, but there were just hardly any remains. And so those 2 British soldiers are in the German cemetery. That was as far as we went in action, but of course on the 26th of June, which I didn't take part in, was Texel. But we went on to Yorks, and going up the hill at Yorks, the tank in front was hit and 2 killed. We went back into a little wood at the bottom, and the Panther in the farm at the top of the hill thought it'd be a very nice place also to shelter from the typhoons which were pestering him. They had pestered us at first, but we put out yellow smoke. And he came down the hill and entered the wood, and Trooper Moffat in the 17-pounder clobbered him. From then on, we went down south and then round to Falaise. We saw no real action after that until we got to Belgium.
Well, thank you, Cecil. Such an atmospheric listen once again, and literally hanging on every word, and heartrending to hear of lost friends in battle. Extremely emotional. In part 3 we follow Cecil into Belgium. Yes, thanks for listening to Your Papers Please with me, Gary Waite. I hope you've enjoyed this podcast, and I look forward to catching up with you again soon. Please don't forget to subscribe so that you can be informed of all future releases. You can find me under Pegasus Battlefield Tours on Facebook and Twitter, and the website www.pegasusbattlefieldtours.com. Thanks everyone. Toodle pip.